all gentlemen, give me this. I will not tolerate such behaviour. If you want to go out now, but if you stand again, I will order you out. Make your mind up. Either shut up and get out.
Neil Hanby and Kenny...
I order... Shut up. Shh. Neil Hanby, I am now naming you and Kenny McCaskill to leave this chamber. Sergeant, deal with them. Deal with them. Deal with them. Just sit down. Out. No. Sergeant at Arms, escort them out. Take them out, Sergeant. Let them out.
The impossible has just happened in Westminster, a declaration so shocking, so unimaginable that the entire nation is still reeling. In a moment that felt more like a political earthquake than a parliamentary announcement, the Speaker of the House of Commons rose to his feet and rewrote the future of Britain. Nigel Farage, the outsider, the rebel, the man dismissed for years, is now against every expectation the next Prime Minister. And as this stunning reality unfolded, Keir Starmer sat frozen, shattered, his authority collapsing in front of millions. This is the moment the old order died. No one expected this day to become history. It began like any ordinary session of Parliament, with scripted debates, predictable arguments, and the same tired rhythm that had numbed the public for years. But the moment Nigel Farage stepped into the chamber, the atmosphere shifted instantly. It was not noise, nor drama, nor chaos that changed the room. It was something far more unsettling. A presence, a calm intensity, a quiet confidence that pulled every gaze toward him as the air thickened with anticipation. MPs who moments earlier had been whispering among themselves straightened in their seats. Conversations fell away. Even the Speaker, usually unmoved, seemed to pause longer than usual as Farage walked past. In that instant, without saying a word, Farage took control of the chamber. When he finally rose to speak, silence swallowed the room. His voice, sharp and precise, cut through the Commons like a blade. He did not warm up. He did not ease in. He went straight for the heart of power and straight for Keir Starmer. With every sentence, Farage exposed the cracks that Labour had tried so desperately to hide. Broken promises, confused policies, economic chaos, a government drifting without purpose. Starmer, who built his reputation on calm discipline, suddenly looked small, fragile, almost ghostly under the harsh lights. Farage spoke not like a politician, but like a prosecutor delivering the final verdict of a long, painful trial. Every accusation landed with devastating force. Every pause made the tension worse. Millions watching from home felt the same cold pressure that filled the chamber. This wasn't debate. This wasn't performance. It was a dismantling. Starmer tried to interrupt, but the words failed him. Instead of authority, he produced a thin, shaky whisper that barely carried across the room. It was the moment everyone watching understood. His image, the one built over years, had broken completely. Then Farage shifted his attack. Rachel Reeves. The Chancellor, who once boasted about competence, now sat stiff, pale, unable to defend herself. Farage exposed her record piece by piece. The failures they tried to spin away, the warnings ignored, the crises denied. Reeves looked like she had been struck across the face, staring at her desk, as Farage's words echoed through the chamber. But he wasn't finished. With a sudden, controlled pivot, he turned toward the Conservative benches. The Tories braced themselves, but nothing prepared them for what followed. Farage didn't just criticise them, he mocked them. He exposed the rot they had hidden behind polished speeches and empty slogans. The chamber erupted with uneasy laughter, laughter that felt like knives. No one was safe. Not Labour, not the Conservatives, not the old system that had ruled Britain for decades. The room fell into a stunned silence. Farage stood alone at the centre, calm, unshaken, commanding the entire political landscape with nothing but his voice. It was in that silence that the Speaker rose. The chamber froze. Every MP leaned forward. Something was happening, something unprecedented. And then, with a single announcement, the Speaker shattered centuries of tradition. Nigel Farage, by the logic of the events unfolding before them and the collapse of confidence across Parliament, had in effect become the next Prime Minister. Gasps broke through the silence. A shockwave rolled across the Commons. Starmer's face turned white. His hands trembled on the desk. MPs looked around as if reality itself had twisted. Farage remained still, silent, almost serene. He didn't need to say a word. The room, the country, the entire political order had already changed. The shock inside the Commons did not fade. It grew, it tightened around every MP like a cold grip as the full meaning of the Speaker's declaration settled over the room. Keir Starmer, the man who had once presented himself as unshakable, now looked like a figure carved out of fear. His eyes darted across the chamber, searching desperately for something. A lifeline, a denial, a hint that this nightmare wasn't real. But nothing came. Even his closest allies avoided his gaze. For the first time since becoming Labour leader, Starmer stood alone. The Labour front bench was in chaos. Whispers exploded into frantic murmurs. Advisers scribbled notes on paper that would never be used. Ministers who had once praised Starmer's discipline now sank into their seats, unwilling to be associated with the collapse happening right beside them. Rachel Reeves gripped the edges of her desk so tightly her knuckles turned white. Her carefully prepared statements, her economic forecasts, her confident interviews, all of it dissolved in an instant under the weight of Farage's assault. Across the aisle, the Conservatives weren't celebrating either. Their faces were twisted with confusion, disbelief and fear. Farage had not treated them as allies or even rivals. He had exposed them with the same ruthless precision he used against Labour. The Tories realised something terrifying. If Farage was rising, their influence was fading. A new power had entered the arena and it wasn't interested in maintaining the old hierarchy. Farage himself stood quietly. He did not smile. He did not gesture. He simply absorbed the silence like a man who had expected this outcome all along. His calm presence only made the moment more overwhelming. The chamber felt smaller around him, as if the very walls leaned closer to hear what would happen next. Starmer attempted to rise. For a moment, it seemed he might fight back, but when he opened his mouth, the words trembled out, thin and empty. There was no authority left in him, no strength. He looked like someone whose entire world had collapsed faster than he could understand. His voice cracked, barely audible, drowned out by the tension swallowing the room. When he sat down again, it was clear to every MP his leadership had ended before he even spoke. Outside Parliament, the reaction was instant and explosive. Newsrooms erupted with alarm, phones buzzed with frantic messages, producers shouted over each other. Within minutes, the announcement was everywhere, on screens, on radios, across social media. Clips of Farage's speech spread like wildfire. Millions replayed the moment Starmer froze. Millions more watched the Speaker's declaration in stunned silence. The country was awake. Outside coffee shops, people gathered around phones. In buses, commuters stared at the breaking headlines. Office workers paused mid-task, speechless. Even those who didn't follow politics closely felt the shift. A deep, heavy sense that something extraordinary had happened. Something irreversible. Back inside Westminster, MPs tried to regain control of themselves. Some stood to speak, but froze under Farage's gaze. Others whispered behind hands, attempting to strategise, but every plan dissolved as quickly as it formed. The chamber was gripped by a force none of them had expected, but genuine fear of losing control. And then came the moment no one noticed at first. Farage exhaled slowly, and with that small gesture, the room steadied itself. Not with peace, but with the recognition that a new leader had emerged. Not chosen by a vote, not secured through deals, but forged through dominance, clarity, and the collapse of the political order around him. Starmer's aides rushed to him, speaking quickly, hands moving nervously, but the defeated expression on his face told the truth. He was no longer guiding events. Events were swallowing him. Everything he built, the image crafted over years, had been shattered in a single afternoon. Political commentators would later call it one of the fastest implosions in modern British history. Inside number 10, panic spread just as quickly. Officials scrambled to prepare statements. Press officers argued over the wording of responses that would sound outdated before they were even released. Civil servants exchanged looks of disbelief as corridors filled with hurried footsteps. No one knew what protocol was supposed to be followed because no protocol had ever imagined a moment like this. Meanwhile, social media surged with reactions. Amazement, anger, excitement, fear. One thing was clear, the nation was experiencing a shift not through policy or election, but through raw force of personality and the public collapse of a government that could no longer hide its weaknesses. Back in the Commons, Farage finally moved. Just a small shift of posture, but it sent another wave of tension through the room. MPs straightened, advisers leaned forward, the Speaker watched him closely, almost cautiously, as if even he understood the magnitude of the man standing before him. Farage didn't need to speak again. His silence was more powerful than any speech. It told the chamber and the nation that something had ended and something new had begun. A moment none of them could ever undo. As the afternoon deepened, Westminster turned into a fortress of confusion. Corridors echoed with hurried footsteps, tense whispers, and the unmistakable sense that the old political order was collapsing in real time. The shock waves of the Speaker's declaration had not weakened. They had intensified, spreading through every office, every committee room, every corner of Parliament. Inside number 10, the atmosphere was suffocating. Aides rushed past one another, clutching papers that no longer mattered, speaking in frantic half-sentences. Senior advisers demanded updates, but no one had answers. The government had not simply lost control of the narrative, it had been swallowed by it. Reporters were gathering outside the gates in numbers not seen since Brexit night, cameras raised, waiting for any movement, any sign, any symbol of authority. None appeared. Keir Starmer remained hidden away in his private office, a shell of the man who had walked into the Commons that morning. The door stayed shut as anxious aides whispered just outside it, debating who should be the one to knock. No one volunteered. Rumours soon spread that Starmer could not concentrate, that he stared blankly at his desk, unable to respond, unable to accept the disaster that had unfolded so brutally and so publicly. His silence only fueled the storm outside. Meanwhile, Nigel Farage moved through the building with the steady confidence of someone who had long prepared for this moment. He didn't raise his voice or issue orders. He didn't boast or celebrate. He simply walked with purpose, as if the power that had shaken the chamber into silence now guided his every step. MPs turned their heads as he passed, some with fear, some with awe, others with a reluctant acceptance that history had chosen its direction, and it was not theirs. The Labour Party, once united under the banner of Starmer's discipline, had turned into a battlefield of blame. MPs argued loudly behind closed doors, some insisting that Starmer resign immediately, others begging for a strategy that no longer existed. Every plan collapsed under the same truth. They were fighting a force they had underestimated for years. Farage had not outmanoeuvred them. He had exposed them. The Conservatives were no better. Senior Tories gathered in tight, anxious groups, whispering frantic predictions about what Farage's rise meant for them. Some feared he would dismantle their influence entirely. Others believed he might absorb their support base and leave them irrelevant. For the first time in decades, the two major parties faced the same threat and had no idea how to counter it. Outside, the streets around Parliament swelled with people. Journalists shouted over each other as cars honked, helicopters hovered, and crowds pushed against barriers to get closer to the unfolding drama. Some chanted Farage's name, others shouted in shock and disbelief. But every face reflected the same emotion, awareness that something monumental had happened, something that would shape the future for years to come. Clips from the Commons circulated at lightning speed. Starmer's trembling hands, Reeves's stunned expression, Tory MPs shrinking in their seats, Farage's calm stare. And most shocking of all, the Speaker's announcement, a moment replayed millions of times within hours. The country was watching, reacting, absorbing every second of the extraordinary collapse. Political commentators tried to keep up, but many found themselves speechless. The traditional rules of politics had been shattered. This wasn't a scandal or a crisis. It was a shift in the balance of power so sudden, so dramatic, that even veterans of political upheaval struggled to explain it. Farage's critics found themselves strangely quiet. The usual accusations, the usual labels, the usual attacks all felt small compared to what had just happened on live television. The public didn't want spin. They wanted clarity. And today, Farage had delivered it with devastating force. His message had cut through years of political noise, and millions felt he had spoken the words they had been waiting to hear. Back inside Parliament, Starmer finally emerged from his office. His steps were slow, unsteady, as if each movement carried the weight of a collapsing career. Aides rushed toward him, offering notes, questions, strategies. He waved them away with a shaking hand. His eyes were vacant, distant, lost in a storm he could no longer control. When he reached the corridor overlooking the Commons chamber, he paused. The sound of echoing voices drifted upward. It was the sound of a building adjusting to new power, a sound he no longer belonged to. Starmer's breath caught in his throat as he realised the truth that millions already knew. He was no longer the centre of anything, he was a spectator. And Farage? He stood downstairs, surrounded by MPs who suddenly gravitated toward him, some seeking influence, some seeking guidance, many simply trying to be near the man at the centre of the earthquake. Farage remained calm, composed, speaking softly, nodding occasionally, as if navigating a moment he had envisioned many times before. What made the moment even more powerful was that Farage wasn't acting like a man seizing power. He was acting like a man answering a call. This wasn't politics anymore. This was a shift in national identity, a transformation of the political landscape that it had been building for years, fueled by frustration, betrayal, and the sense that the country had been ignored for far too long. By the time evening approached, one thing had become clear across the United Kingdom. The old era had ended. The balance of power had cracked, exposing the weakness of the establishment. And standing at the centre of the storm was Nigel Farage, steady, silent and unshaken. The question that now consumed the nation was simple and terrifying. What happens next? The clock struck 2:17 a.m. when the final blow landed. Inside the Situation Room bunker, the walls vibrated with overlapping voices, advisors arguing, intelligence chiefs demanding action, civil servants scrambling through digital folders that suddenly wouldn't open. A cyber lockdown had sealed half the government's internal network, and every second pushed the crisis deeper into chaos. A single phrase glowed across the central display screen. Operation Night Circle Phase 3 initiated. No one knew who triggered it, no one knew where it originated, but everyone knew what it meant. The last phase had begun. Across the city, a convoy of unmarked black vehicles tore through the rain-flooded streets. Their destination, number 10. Their mission, classified. And yet the entire country could feel the shift, like the pull of gravity, changing direction. Inside Downing Street, Starmer's final hour was unfolding. He stood at the long oak table, surrounded by files, tablets, and the last few loyal ministers who had not yet resigned or vanished behind medical leave statements. His hands trembled, not with fear, but with the realisation that something far larger than politics had been unleashed. You need to step down before they force you, warned his chief strategist, voice cracking. If you wait for the court's order in the morning, it'll be the end of your legacy. Starmer didn't respond. Instead, he stared at the classified document in front of him, the one labelled Night Circle, the one he had never authorised, the one containing a contingency plan that should have been impossible to activate, a plan designed for only one scenario, a Prime Minister stripped of authority by forces he couldn't control. As he read, sirens erupted outside. The convoy had arrived. Downing Street security spread across the courtyard, but they were outnumbered almost immediately. The vehicle's doors swung open and teams from the Special Executive Liaison Unit, a group that officially did not exist, stepped out with sealed orders. The lead officer held a single black folder. Prime Minister, he said calmly, by emergency judicial directive, you are required to vacate office effective immediately. Please comply. The room froze. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then footsteps echoed behind Starmer. His final remaining cabinet ally whispered, "It's done. They've pushed it through. Night Circle wasn't a threat, it was a signal." Outside, cameras had already gathered. Phones were out. The world waited to see the door of number 10 open. Starmer exhaled slowly. He straightened his tie. He picked up the resignation draft he had refused to sign hours earlier. And without another word, he walked toward the door, the soft hum of rain, the only sound following him. When the black door opened, flashes detonated across the courtyard like lightning. The headline was born instantly. The impossible has happened. Prime Minister removed in Night Circle operation. But the story wasn't over, not even close. Because as Starmer stepped into the storm of cameras, a second notification hit every news desk, every phone, every screen across the United Kingdom. A new message from the same unknown sender. Phase 4 begins at dawn. And this time there was no file attached, no explanation, just a countdown. 6 hours, 34 minutes, 12 seconds. Whatever came next, no one was ready for it.